Hey guys, Tammy here. And today I want to talk about how to cope when you're triggered. Now, I think that if you've been through a toxic relationship, which I'm assuming you have by the way of the fact that you're probably watching this video, or if you've just had trauma in your life, right? So sometimes we've had trauma that is in addition to the toxic relationship that causes us to then be triggered by things. As most of you know, my husband Thomas, who started the channel with me, who was a family law attorney, passed away about a year and a half ago. And I certainly am having different things that happen that trigger me. So it kind of started me thinking about, how that happens in our day to day life with different things around these types of situations with, custody and divorce in particular. And so I want to dive into that a little bit, and hopefully give you some tools to be able to cope with that a little bit better. Before I dive into this topic, as always, let me remind you, if you like this video, don't forget to hit like and also subscribe to the channel so that you get notified as new videos are released. And go check out the podcast if you're not listening to that, because the content is slightly different. And please share on social media. This came to mind for me actually today specifically. I had a very close friend whose sister had been ill for a while, but she passed away suddenly. Like, she had cancer, and she had, not been doing well, not been doing great, but was not to the point where they felt like, at least the family did not feel like she was in any imminent danger. And I don't want to go into details about what happened or whatever, but there was essentially just, they woke up in the middle of the night, and, there was a traumatic, she was in a traumatic state, and they called 911, and, she did not make it. So, we were having this discussion about it, and I'm a year and a half out from this happening with Thomas. And as most of you know, if you don't know about it, you can go back to Thomas passed at the end of April. So I think beginning of May 2023, and there's an episode on it. You can see that episode, and you can see the state that I was in at the time. And, obviously I can talk about it now. It's much better. I've processed it more. I've dealt with it more, but I found myself standing there talking to this person, and just the tears just uncontrollably flowing for me. And I think that happens a lot with, really traumatic situations like this, like where we've been dealing with a narcissist, or where we've experienced different things around our child custody situations. Or, I talk to different parents who have gone months without seeing their kids, or they've lost parenting time, or whatever the case may be, they've been accused of domestic violence that, that they aren't guilty of, or all these different things that happen. And then you think you're healing, you think you're doing better, you think you're moving through it, and suddenly you find yourself standing there, in my case, uncontrollable tears flowing from where I was triggered today. Now, one of the things that you have to understand is that many times we react with anger to things. And I think that's true in the particular case of talking about, if you're talking to someone who's dealing with a similar child custody situation, or somebody, this is something to be aware of when you're talking to another person who maybe they've had their own experience in the past, and you start having this conversation with them, and you just feel all this anger coming out of them, and you're like, oh my goodness, this is what I have to look forward to, feeling angry and hating my ex. And sometimes we are the ones that feel angry and hate our ex, right? And the reason that anger comes is because it's covering over hurt, right? I mean, I'm sure most of you have heard that anger covers over hurt, because we either have to, if you feel the feelings, sometimes that puts you in a state where you're not functional, right? So sometimes the anger is easier because it at least moves you into a space where you can function, right? You can function if you're angry. You might be angry, but I can sit down and I can probably work even if I'm angry. I can go make myself something to eat. I can drive the kids to school. I can do all those things. But if I'm in a state where I'm completely just brought to my knees and I'm in uncontrollable tears and all that kind of stuff, it's harder to do those things, right? So sometimes the anger covers it over and enables us to be functional despite the fact that we've been triggered. So what do you do when this happens? So this happened for me today, and I came home after it had happened, and I thought, I'm just not in a good place. What am I going to do? The first thing that I did was just to take some time for myself, right? And part of this is you have to know yourself. Sometimes people need to be around other people. Sometimes I'm in a state where I need to vent, right? It sort of depends on the trigger. It depends on what the trigger is in regard to. In this particular case, it was in regard to my grief. So I feel, like I just felt like in that moment that I needed to be by myself. And I don't always feel that way with the grief. Most of the time, I would say my default is I want to be with other people. But just taking that moment to kind of check in with yourself and say, how am I feeling right now? Do I want to be around other people? Do I not? And, maybe you had something planned with somebody and you have to say, I'm sorry, but I've just kind of had this little emotional episode and I need a little bit of solitude. I need a little bit of quiet time. Anybody that's truly your friend and that loves you, friends, family, people that truly care about you are going to respect that. They're going to honor that and allow you that time and space that you need. Okay. The second thing I did was I got outside. I mean, fortunately the sun was shining. It was in the afternoon today. I was able to get outside. It was like early afternoon. It was like 12 or 1 earlier today, but I was able to get outside. I was able to walk a little bit, put on some, some worship music is what I particularly listened to. And just to be able to kind of walk and be with my thoughts and process and kind of go, okay, my grief is being triggered by this person's grief and just letting myself cry and letting myself process it and, or letting yourself be angry or be frustrated at your situation or letting yourself just process and feel whatever you feel. I think a lot of times when we develop anxiety around these types of issues, and I do talk to a lot of people who have anxiety around the custody and their children issues, because we're worried and we're kind of internalizing it. We're kind of holding it all in. And what if this and what if that and da 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 da. And if you can shift that and just kind of accept that, what, I'm scared. What, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't like feeling out of control. I'm worried, whatever it is. And to be able to process that, and whether that's crying about it, whether that's just thinking through it rationally for you. It looks different for different people, but being able to physically move your body, or at the very least, maybe being able to breathe. Maybe you've got kids in the house and you can't get out and leave, but maybe you can say, hey, I'm going to put the TV on. I need 10 minutes to myself. And you can go in your room and do a breathing exercise, take some deep breaths, get some oxygen flowing, and all that kind of thing. Even just standing out on your patio and letting some sunshine hit you if you have that luxury. I'm in California, so I pretty much can do that most days, but not all places can necessarily do that. Getting that light in for you and having the ability to kind of give yourself a little bit of a timeout and isolating and recognizing that you're having these emotions. And I think that when we get triggered by something, our very first instinct most of the time is sort of that panic, right? Like, oh, I feel the trigger. Oh my goodness, what am I going to do? And that's how I kind of felt initially. Like, I stood and talked to the person and she's my friend, and I tried to comfort her and be there for her and all that kind of thing. And in the moment, I was okay in the moment because, as I said, it's been 18 months for me since Thomas passed, right? Um, and so I think a lot of times, like maybe you've been going through this, or you have another friend that's new to it, or they're worried about their child custody, or they have some incident and all that kind of thing. And maybe in the moment you're able to be present and have that conversation, but then you come back after the fact and you kind of just, I could feel myself just kind of unraveling. And like I said, the tears started coming and it was just kind of uncontrollable for me. I had to take that time out, check in with myself, have that grace for yourself, and just know that it's okay for you to take that 5 or 10 minutes and to recognize that you're triggered, to try to get outside, do something nurturing for yourself. Meditate is a great one. Maybe you journal, maybe that's how, and I've never been a big journaler, but I can tell you it has helped me process a lot of the emotions around my grief with Thomas's death in particular. And I did journal during my divorce as well. And like I said, not a big writer, but I did find it helpful in getting my emotions out, because sometimes it's that equivalent to venting when you don't have a person there, right? To just sit down and write it all out, or calling that person that you can vent to. I think that the most important thing about this is trying not to shove it down, which I think a lot of us do. We try to just push it down and be like, oh, I'll be fine, I'll be okay. But honestly, that usually manifests as anxiety or panic attacks or chronic anxiety or whatever, or stress or stomach aches or headaches or whatever it is, if you're trying to push it all down. So when you are triggered, you need to take that little time and go, okay, I am triggered. Let me go and process this. But then you do have to push yourself to keep going, right? I couldn't just, I suppose I could have just crawled in bed and ignored the rest of the day. That wouldn't have helped me feel any better. I think sometimes we sort of metaphorically curl up in a little ball when we get triggered, and we think we're just going to wait for it to pass. Only the problem is it usually doesn't. That usually does not help it pass. Like I said, you have to do some processing work, whether that's getting out for a walk so you can think, journaling, meditating, venting to someone, something to help you process those emotions and those thoughts, so that then you can come back and function and be the parent that you need to be to your kids, right? So taking that time out with them and saying, hey, I need a few minutes, whatever, is going to enable you to be a better parent over the long term than just trying to like shove that down and keep going and ignore it, which is what I think as a parent we do most of the time. This is your reminder to have some grace for yourself. If you'd like to learn more about my services and how I can support you, you can go to divorceuniversityonline.com/VIP-coaching. There's a link on that page. You can book a time to speak to a member of my staff, learn more about my services and how I might be able to support you on this journey. See you guys next time.